number one source, Sports Card Nation. The hobby is the people. Sports Card Nation.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 398 of Sports Card Nation, as we are days away. If you're listening to this at show release day, we're days away from the National in Chicago. Again, I always say this, if all goes well, I will make it there safely. Hope to see and meet many of you out there. I know it's always humbling to me if someone taps me on the shoulder and says, "Hey, John, appreciate you. I love the show, blah, blah, blah." And never gets lost on me. And, even 8 years into podcasting, which that even sounds crazy to say. So hope to see many of you on the show floor or events even after the show. Today, part 2 of our conversation with NBA's Mike Baker. And again, a guy that knows a lot about the grading space and a lot about the hobby, but specifically even the grading space. So today's the conclusion of our conversation. If you missed last week's show, no problem. It's out there still for your downloading or listening pleasure. I want to thank our great sponsors, SGC, Iron Sports Cards, Sports Collectors Digest, Hobby Hotline, Upper Deck, Card Ladder, and Certified Trading Card Association. So with that being said, let's get the show started. You mentioned PWCC. They had some of their awards when they were around and existed. And I think sometimes anyone that does any kind of affiliation or aligns themselves with them will take some of that heat, whether it's justifiable or unjustifiable. I mean, talk to you, they don't exist anymore in their original form as they, talk about, as much as you can, like, did it affect your brand? I know sometimes you're mentioned when someone is speaking ill of PWCC. Sometimes they'll throw your name into the same hat, whether that's, right or wrong. Just talk about some of that, that happens there.
Overall, I can tell you that I was telling you before we got out and we went live, the shows, I go to like 2 to 3 shows every month. I travel all across the country. I believe I'm the only grader that's stepping outside of a booth to talk to customers about whatever they want to talk about. So I'm not on message boards. I'm not, battling at 2:00 in the morning, somebody that has a different opinion than I do. I don't do that, but I'm happy to have a healthy discussion about whatever is going on in the hobby, good, bad, and different. I told you I'm an open book before we got on, and I am. I'll answer tough questions and take tough, whatever it may be. I don't dodge. Regarding PWCC, no. I mean, or any other service for that matter. We're going to do what I'm going to do, and anyone else can do whatever they want to do. And ultimately, I'll be judged by how we conduct ourselves and how we go forward. And, when you're disrupting things, when you're grading the graders or you're auditing a grading company or whatever the words are to describe what we're doing. And really what we're doing is, it's a crossover service. PSA, Beckett, SGC all provide a crossover service where they're grading their competitors to see if that card can then be turned into or crossed over into their product. That's all that we're doing with that. So it's not much more. There's no like smoke anywhere other than the simple fact that that's what we are doing. So I hope we continue to do more of it, and I'll continue to go out and keep charging down the line to, get our brand awareness out there as much as all the other companies have been with a much larger track record and time in, basically. So.
Well, I appreciate you being candid and like you said, I never even thought about it until like you said, we talked before we hit record, right? Is, whatever the other 3 grading company, the ones you see in the front are not the graders or not, you know what I mean? They're representatives of the company, and you're behind your table, right? That's your name.
My name's on it.
Your name on the company, right? And you you said, you're not hiding, you're not behind the curtain. And so that's refreshing. And I definitely appreciate that about you. And I'm sure others do as well. And again, like you said, you'll answer whatever question someone may have. I just hope like I try to do, people, ask them tactfully and respectfully rather than, Yahoo
accusatory.
about it, but
Yeah.
yeah. So
Like we were talking earlier too, people coming up, they're all I don't have a back and forth or, hey, let's go outside and finish this discussion.
yeah.
I don't have, that never gets to that. So, I think if given a couple of minutes or whatever time frame, as long as I answer the question and they can see my eyes, see my body language, and know that I'm trying to be as transparent as I possibly can be and be honest about it. In this market too, there's so much misconception, and news today can be not the news tomorrow. And so I always try to just be consistent with who you are. That's another cliche, but it does matter. So
Yeah, no, it's well said. All right, Mike, I got to ask your opinion, right? Counterfeit cards, altering, cleaning, adding color. I'm sure I left something out. That's not a new thing. That's been around for years. But do you think we're seeing more of that?
Well, it's hard to, maybe because we have more information about it. We have more of it because there's just more cards being submitted. When you see some of the metrics that PSA has put out, their counterfeits went up whatever percent. It's because they're getting more of them, or there's just more volume coming in and people just don't know. Or if they do know, they're trying to get it past you or past the grading service. So, by de facto, you would expect if you're doing, 10,000 cards, 20 years ago, and you're doing 2 million cards 20 years later, that there's going to be, I don't know if it's a higher percentage per se, or is it just, it's kind of rolls with the numbers. Not everybody has a 1986 Michael Jordan Fleer that's counterfeit to pump the numbers up. I'm sure most people would want an authentic one. I guess the real question is, within this market that has become so hyperbolic and international, are there bad actors out there, creating things and doing things to really, kind of go within the 2 million card submission or whatever the submissions are for any grading service that's out there? Are they trying to filter some of those in? I'd probably say yes. Now, to what degree is debate. And that's based on what the grading services are seeing in their metrics, based on how many they've caught, how many are in holders, how many they kicked as, as trimmed or recolored or whatever. And those data points, I'm sure, are definitely available internally. I don't know what they are externally per se, but I can tell you that recoloring seems to be a big one with Pokemon, both in coloring pencil and in pen, to hide some of the chipping on the back, whether it's blue or the gold. So that's definitely a big. And if you again look at the numbers based on what PSA is receiving, if they're doing over 1.5 million TCG Pokemon cards, and it's like 500,000-600,000 sports cards, then the numbers for those types of cards are probably pretty high. In terms of, trying to improve the card's condition by coloring the card. The other ones, I don't know. We don't get a lot of, fake 6 Jordans. It's like, when you have a computer virus, you're going to get a lot more on a Mac, or excuse me, a lot more on a Windows operating system, because more people have Windows than Mac. So, that just kind of goes with the territory. So,
yeah, we've seen grading card companies get criticized, PSA, really all of them, right? Yourself included. I've seen like, hey, they slabbed or they stickered this and it turned out to be, fake or altered. How can that happen? How do you I'll ask you sort of a 2-pronged question, right? How does that happen? And are these people who are doing these bad things, and are they getting better? It's illegal, but are they getting better at their illegal craft through the year? Is it getting harder to detect this stuff than it was 10 or 20 years ago?
So some of the Pokemon and TCG cards are definitely challenging to detect. They're coming, some of them look really good, no doubt about it. And it's mainly ultra. Counterfeiting a 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle, no, because you can't recreate the paper stock. I haven't seen that done ever. T206 Honus Wagner, nope, haven't seen one that even come close to being original. So, and I don't think you would find, or unless it was a glaring error, any grading service with their salt would have holdered or have holdered anything in the vintage sports primarily, in the counterfeiting world or whatever. Alteration, trimming, and whatnot has always been kind of the thing, or something that anyone could do. It doesn't take a 3D printer to make a new card type thing. You need a cutter or whatever instrument is being used to improve the edge or corners of a card. Mainly they leave traditionally they leave signatures to the cut, striations on the edge, and people will use old cutting blades to mirror what it looks like. They'll age the card by adding, to dirt it up basically so I always call it like, when you remove bark from a tree, you see the new underlinements of the tree. Much like paper, if you cut something that's been oxidized and exposed to air and, wear or use, it looks dirty. It looks time period, so to speak. And if you cut it, it's going to show a whiter or cleaner edge. People will try to hide that and doctor it up to, fool the graders and whatnot. So, yeah, it's a challenge, but there's no grading service that wants to hold their cards that have been trimmed or counterfeit. You're not going to have a long shelf life. That's just a fact. So, no, I think everyone's doing what they can. We're doing everything we can on our end relative to using machine learning to help us with size, to help be more consistent with centering. Even though we can grab a loop lens and mic it out to micrometers and get the exact stuff on the left to right or the top to bottom, it's nice to have what the learning system is telling us its opinion is, and then we marry it up. It's like having a second automated grader with you. So it's an assistant really to help and honestly help speed up, because if you're taking time to loop every card in terms of identifying centering, it takes time. And to have something that's close to it, and then you can verify it if needed, then, there's that sizing, immediately whether or not the card is 2.5 by 3.5 from 1957 to present, and you can, evaluate the card and go forward from that. Ultimately, it's going to be what your experience is in looking at those cards, though. You can have a card that measures exactly to factory specs, and it still could be altered and or trimmed. And that's going to be up to you and how much experience you have with that issue to determine that. And not only call it once, you get scared and don't grade it, and then it comes back and it's seen again a couple months later, or whatever it may be, and you grade it. So there's the built-in inconsistency. So really, you have to grade what you see. You can't take, if you have to articulate what you see. So if in fact you're going to call something that cannot be holdered for whatever reason, you got to be able to articulate that. It'll resonate more with the grading process, and that makes you more consistent as a grading service. And I think you or the submitters at large, once you start seeing what the grading services are calling it that way, you can hopefully get more educated about how we're seeing it, and then you can be a stopgap or a filter before those cards ever come to a grader's desk.
Yeah, it's funny. I almost feel like it's a chess match, right, between grading companies and graders and the people doing, the bad things, trimming, altering, making just a fake card. And it's like you got to just stay one step ahead of them as they improve what they do. It's like cat and mouse, right? And it reminds me like the FBI. Like the FBI will sometimes hire like former, burglars and crooks to pick their brain to like, hey, what are we looking for, or how do we stop this, and that sort of thing. Or especially with like hackers and computer, they'll hire those folks and pay them and make them use their craft for good rather than the other side. And it just sort of reminds me of that. And it's funny you mentioned, because there's a lot of times, when I'm thinking about what I do with the SGC bulk service, obviously I'm handling those cards at my table as they're being subbed. And I'll see a Jordan rookie and I'll know like, hey, I have to be the bearer of bad news. Like I'm 99% sure, this is not legit. Where did you get, what's the provenance? Where did you get it? And, and sometimes someone will say, well, thank you. That's what I thought. You kind of confirmed it. Other times people will say, John, like, I believe you. And I think so too. Can we just, I'll pay for it. I'll send it. I got to know for sure. And I'm like, just be prepared. It's probably going to be that, but we'll let them make that determination. And you mentioned Pokemon. I'm not a Pokemon guy, but obviously I get those cards through that bulk submission. And per capita, I'll use that qualifier. I get more Pokemon cards back ungraded for, like you said, either altering or just being plain out a fake, comparably speaking, to the sports counterparts. I guess, why do you think that is? Is it just maybe easier? Is it just because it's blowing up right now? People will tell you like right now, Pokemon's even hotter than, the sports card market? Is it as simple as that, or why does it seem like we're seeing more,
It's
fake and altering on the Pokemon side? Or it seems that way. And
you just hit
but
you just checked all the boxes in terms of why. It's the number one submitted card right now by a factor of like 2.5 times to its sports, contemporary. It's all made now, so it's all modern. So if you had a print shop that was legit, and you could go to places that will do it for you in the Far East, you could get away with a lot of stuff, especially because there's a lot of people collect that raw. And in our market, as you know, if you get something that's cheaper than it usually goes, you think you got a deal. And so it's like your natural reaction to not think that there's something wrong with the card and celebrate the fact that you got it for cheaper than what it actually goes for. And you kind of rationalize that in your mind that you got a deal, and you're not even thinking about whether it's authentic or not. At least the collectors, the dealers have more awareness on what they should look for. There's enough information out there.
Time to hear from one of our great sponsors, but Sports Card Nation will be right back after that.
Iron Sports Cards is your #1 source for all your PSA and other grading submissions. Their elite status improves turnaround times. Heck, they even provide the card savers. Their chat rooms provide updates on all your submissions. They also offer wax options and single cards to cover all the bases. Check them out on Facebook at Iron Sports Cards Group or on the web at ironsportscards.com, or even give them a call at 1-877-IRON-PSA. Rob's got you covered.
Let's go! You are listening to the Sports Card Nation podcast.
I've said this in interviews in the past. There's some guys that really know their stuff, and they're happy to publish it on YouTube and Instagram and all that stuff, talk about what there's like subgroups of guys that are really like into basketball, or Pokemon vintage or whatever. And, those guys are some of the best detectives out there too. And I'd be an idiot not to listen to what they're seeing trend wise and everything else. I think the grading service as a whole, if they're smart, they're looking at these specialists and the different little nooks and crannies of the hobby and see what they have, and kind of use them as a hub for trends that are happening. What do how does it work? You've seen some of the videos where you can take some of these Pokemon cards and literally take the top part of it, and it just pulls right off like a sticker. It literally is a sticker. It's not even a card. Well, it's a sticker card basically, but the way it's produced is so not the way it was produced from the factory. And as you can see, it's, in its kind of infancy. I think they're going to get better, honestly, in terms of what's coming in Pokemon in particular. But I think if we all kind of work together, and, the grading service is where the buck stops with whatever grading service you have and what their experience is and what they're going to put in a holder, et cetera, et cetera. So just what's the approach to make sure that you have guardrails up to do as much as you can to ensure that cards that shouldn't be in a holder don't end up in a holder?
Yeah, no doubt. And I agree. I guess, with I don't do Pokemon, but I've seen just a lot more come back counterfeit. I'm more apt to catch at my table, Mike. I'm more apt to catch a sports card. That's my lane.
Yep.
I've caught them before. And again, some people will still say, well, can I still send it? I just, for my own peace of mind, I want them to sort of give it a thumbs up or thumbs down. And, and sometimes that happens. What do you say when someone says, I get this all the time, like someone doesn't like the grade they get, and they'll say, well, the grader might have gotten an argument with his wife that morning, or, and brought it to work. I mean, do you buy that, or do you think that's just sour grapes?
Well, I mean, that's exactly my point with cause and effect. I got a bad card. I think if the grading services were more transparent about why the card graded the way it did, it'd be much more, helpful in having those type of conspiratorial theories, diminished basically. Because, for MBA, every card that we do, or whether it's a graded card or a card that receives a sticker, you get a heat map from us, which tells you exactly where we have with the card. We don't, dissect the whole card and give you every single problem, but mainly the main concern with the card, and, is the upper left corner, or is it, a surface scratch or something, just to kind of help you kind of get some more information than what's currently available. That helps. As far as a guy having a bad night with his lady, or, I'm sure, hey, look, we're all human beings, right?
Yeah.
If you're pissed off, you're not happy with whatever's going on in your life, I think there's a general sense that you could be more conservative or, that kind of thing. That's not too far out of the realm, but that doesn't help the service. It doesn't help your job. I think nobody wants more customer complaints. Nobody wants that. So to do that would just be adding accelerant to something that already exists, and you don't have to do it. Just do your job. If you're a professional, I'm sure you could say, oh, that guy had a bad night. I doubt it was because he got in a fight with he just had a bad night, So
it's like an athlete, right? These guys are great. They could go 0 for 4 and strike out 3 times, right?
Yep.
And the next night go 4 for 4 with 2 home runs and 6 RBIs. Like I get it. I like the fact that you said like you heat map it, because one of the questions I get back when grading's done and I'm returning the cards and someone that maybe doesn't like the grade, or like, hey, what caused this 8, let's say, and there's really no explanation. And they'll be, John, look at this card. What do you see? Like, can you see it? Like, and I'm like, well, look at it under, magnification too. Like sometimes you can't always see things just with the naked eye. So I always say, and that's even before sending the grading, Mike, not after the fact, but it's nice that you're letting the subber know, like, here's why this got this grade. So that sort of takes that guessing game out that I have to play sometimes with some of my subbers, where they're like, John, what do you see here? Like, I don't see it. Like, I don't get it. Like this. Yeah. And it puts me in a weird spot. Like, you know what I mean? It's not I shy away from, but I'm like, I don't know. There's something like, and I always have at my table, I always have like one of these. I actually have one right here, but I have one at my show table, like just a magnification, right? Look, any tool you can use beforehand that maybe, that was one of the early mistakes I made when I was grading my cards back in the, 20 years ago, is I gave myself too many passes. Like I'd see something, be like, that's minor, no big deal, and you learn by trial and error, like,
yep,
they're doing their job. It's not a no big deal to them. You're giving yourself a free pass, but that's not what they're going to do or should do, right? And I learned, and I think sometimes we're all guilty of that, right? When we critique ourselves, sometimes we'll be a little easier on ourselves than maybe someone else would. I just think, like you said, it's human nature and that sort of thing. One last question before we kind of I've had this debate with sometimes people, whether it be on the podcast or even at a show. There's people that say, John, in the art world, right? They bring pictures back. They recondition them. They'll fix them so they're as close to like original form, and it's not viewed as altering. They're still up in museums. They're still protected with security systems. Like, I don't think adding a little color to a card or rolling a crease out, if it keeps the same size, if that's possible. I just think that's kind of what the art world does. It should be more widely accepted in the hobby. And I disagree. They're just two different genres. And so while one may be sort of like accepted, I don't think that necessarily means we have to accept that in the hobby. I'm sure you've heard that argument before, kind of, I get that all the time. How do you, what's your response when someone maybe brings that up to you as someone in the gradings itself?
Yeah, I mean, forever it's been trading cards that's not allowed. In coins, you can dip a coin. You can in comic books you can restore, in art you can restore, in cars you can restore. For whatever reason, our collectible that's just the way it's always been. I will say that we don't NBA. We're not guessing. And there's a lot of cards that have been stored in screw downs forever. Grading services frown on that now because it leaves a shininess to the top of the card, and they are saying it's altered. And I think maybe that's kind of kicked the can a little too far, in my opinion, because ultimately, if a card has been altered or its stock has been pressed and it affects the thickness of the card, so you have a nice thick edge and then it gets really narrow in its thickness towards the corner to improve the corner, that's altered, no doubt. Okay, but I can't throw a dart and see a card that I see it before and after, and everything, measures out. The stock is professionally or the mics are professional to the factory or origination of that. So it's like that if you take your finger and lick a corner right out of a pack, some people call that altering a card. If the grader can't pick it off, it's not, or in our opinion, so coloring, not going to happen. Removal of color, and then it can be graded because the color's not there anymore and it gets downgraded based on what the card looks like. Trimming, no. If you can see a trimmed edge, even if it measures and you can be consistent to that, you got to call it. The pressing part is always kind of a wobbler because if it's done right, it's like fingerprint wiping. If people think that that's no good, well, how can you tell? You have to go on what you can see, not what people think they know or what it looked like before. I can tell you that no grader wants to put their name on something or have it go into a holder unless it meets the standards for what you've done and how you do it for the service. So that's it in a bag of tricks. So I know sometimes you'll see cards that I've seen on message boards over the years of before and after, and it's like, wow, that's really good, and they'll call it, but then you see it in person, you're like, what, God, I don't know if I would have caught that, so completely transparent. I'd love to say I'm a super grader and I see everything. Excuse me, and I sure try to. Some things are just you can't, and you just have to be consistent to whatever you're saying. That's why I said earlier, we grade what we see, not what we think, because what we think is going to be, the line's going to be all over the place. And it's when you're going to have a lot of income. So just keep up the guardrails, do your best, stick to the standard, and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, I agree. Well said. And, it's crazy, right? What some of these folks are like developing new techniques to try to fool you guys, right?
That's
and you know what I mean? And
yeah.
that's never going away. And with the new technologies that come out every year, it's just it keeps you on your toes, I'm sure.
Yep.
And makes your job a little more difficult than it has to be sometimes, I'm sure. Yep. Well, Mike, I appreciate you making some time. I know you're a busy guy, traveling, being at the front of that table at the shows and other things. I appreciate you making some time. I always give the guests kind of the final word. Social medias, what's coming, anything you want to plug, website, take your time, get all that information out there for the listener.
Sure. Thank you. Basically, our website is grading.mba. Our Instagram is grading.mba, trying to keep things consistent and easy. We do a lot of announcements of our show travel and whatnot on both the website and the Instagram channel in particular. We're trying to get more social with Twitter or X and YouTube and whatnot. We're a small company. We're growing. We just had our first job fair here at the Front Row Portland show. We're going to have another one in the Tacoma show next month. We're hiring big time right now, just like everybody is. The market's so big. And if you're not hiring right now, something's wrong. So I can say that. We have our new holder that's going to be coming up at the National, hopefully, for tall boys and for T3s and 5x7 star, all that good stuff. So we're excited about that. We've got some great strategic partnerships we're going to announce going into the National. We've got some great card sales for NBA graded that we're going to pump that have gone we've been kind of keeping off grid right now. And they're going to be announced by both the buyer and the seller in terms of what's been sold. So I think some of those will be kind of eyebrow raising, great positive news. And we're looking forward to just keep growing the brand, keep going to shows, keep spreading the word, letting people know how we do, what we do, how we do it. So we can kind of clear up some of the perceptions about grading the graders or whatever it is, and sticking with the facts relative to the business case and why it's needed. And just, and be us. I'm going to be me. Enjoy the hobby. Ultimately, the hobby is supposed to be enjoyed. The money's gotten so big. We throw terms around like 10K and 20K like it's $5. So, it's a weird market right now, but it's one market that no one's ever seen before happen. And like you, I hope it goes for as long as so.
Yeah, no doubt. Well said. Again, I appreciate you, taking some time out of your busy schedule and giving us a little bit here for the podcast. So, Mike, continued success and growth and all the good things that come along with that.
Thank you, John.
Thank you to Mike Baker for making some time for us. A very busy man with the National coming up and as he said on both episodes, he's got some irons in the fire as he expands his business, including potentially overseas and what have you. So, it was a long time coming, but glad he made some time for us, and maybe somewhere down the line we'll have him back on. So we're going to wrap up today's episode, and we'll see you here in next week. And again, if you're at the National and you see me and you want to have a conversation or shake a hand, love to do so. Love meeting people in the hobby. Heck, the tagline of the show is "The hobby is the people." So you can't have that tagline and not like people or want to meet people. So hope to see some of you at the National. And whether I do or I don't, I hope you have a great National, get all the cards you want, and have a great time. That's what I'm going to try to do. So hopefully see you there.
Time for our Hobby is the People Announcer of the Week.
Hey, what's up? It's your boy Caleb, at Mr. Caleb on Twitter. And remember, the hobby is the people.
If you'd like to be the Hobby is the People Announcer of the Week, do a WAV or MP3 file and send it to sportscardnationpc@gmail.com.
Say goodnight, Kane.